Welcome back. In this video, we are going to continue working on the Southwest Vet site. We are going to put some styling into this testimonial section, and then we're going to start styling the overall page so that it looks a lot nicer. So let's go ahead and jump back into it. I have my images in here for my testimonials, so I'm going to navigate down to this section here where I have my testimonials, and I'm going to start adding to this here. So I'm going to put everything into a row because I want the testimonials to sit 2 by 2. So I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to give it a class of row. I'm going to wrap that around this content that I have here. Cut the ending tag, wrap it around here. So that's my end of row here. And then each of these testimonials is going to become a block quote because they are a quote, so that's why we're putting them in a block quote. So I'm going to give the tag of block quote. I don't need a citation since these are kind of made up block quotes. I'm going to give them an ID of the person who did them. So the first person is Jane H. If you scroll all the way over, you can see there's Jane H. So I'm going to give ID because we're going to be using this for our CSS. So our ID equals Jane H. And then I'm just going to set this to, because I want them to go 2 by 2 of COL SM6. Oops, excuse me, I didn't put a class on there. That's why it looked a little funny. So class, there we go. Now that's going to go ahead and have them sit 2 by 2. So I'm going to take Jane's quote, I'm going to put it inside that block quote there. And then I'm going to divide this up a little bit because I'm going to have part of the quote show and then a little hover effect that shows the rest of the quote. So inside this block quote, inside that block quote, I'm going to go ahead and break this up. So I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to give it a class of quote. I'm going to wrap that inside here. So see my block quote, and then I've got a div. All right, and then I'm going to turn this, breaking it up into different span tags. So I'm going to give it a span, and this span is going to have a class of intro, which we will come back to in our CSS. So when we style it, we will call that intro and everything that applies to it. So the first little bit is going to be the first bit of pretty much this first sentence. During the summer, the rabbit has some itching. So that's going to go into the intro. And then the rest of this is going to fit into a span tag with a class of more. And that's going to wrap around everything except the customer's name. So I'm going to just break the line there just so I can see it. There we go. There's the end of that. And then I'm going to wrap a span around the customer's name. And that is going to have a class of customer. And again, that's going to wrap around the name. So there we go. That's how we're going to style with the HTML anyway. Each of these block quotes, so we've got a block quote, it has the ID of the person. We're going to have it go 2 by 2. So because I have 4 quotes, it's going to sit 2 by 2. I'm breaking it up into So this div is kind of holding the whole quote together, the intro, the more, and then the customer name. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that for the rest of these people. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a new block quote. And this one is going to have the ID of the McPhersons. So ID equals McPhersons. And then I'm going to give it that same COLSM6. Helps if I write class. There we go. Wrap this block quote around everything. Create a new div. And I'm going to give it a class of quote. I'm going to wrap that around the whole quote here. Great. And then I'm going to just go ahead and copy some of these little spans. So I'm going to copy this one for the intro since I've already done it once. And then I'm going to put the end of that after Specialist at Southwest. So open that up, end of span tag. And I'm going to create a new one for intro, or excuse me, more. And that's span tag. And then one more for the customer. Just be careful when you're copying tags to make sure you end them in the proper spot. There. Class customer, the McPhersons. That looks good. All right. Wrap that around everything. Let's do it again. If you feel like this is kind of tedious, you're not wrong. Block quote. ID of John B. Class COL SM6. Great. Wrap that block quote around. Create a new div, the class of quote. Wrap that around. And class of intro, whoops, hit it twice. And then I'm going to break that after this first sentence, kidney failure. And my span tag there. I'll create another one for more, so I'm going to copy that. And then that's going to end. And then span class of customers right around John B. There we go. And then one more around the last one for Lorraine S. block quote, ID of Lorraine S, class of COL SM6. I'm going to wrap that around the quote. There we go. Create a div here. Give that a class of quote. Wrap that around. And then take my intro. Even book pet fish appointments. And my span tag there. And then more, span class of more around the rest of it. And then wrapping the span of customer around the name. Let's go ahead and save that. Check out what we've got here. There we go. So those are sitting 2 by 2 for our testimonials. And we did a lot of IDs in here, so let's go ahead and add some CSS to this. So let's take a point here to make a new CSS document. So right now we've just been working in the HTML for this site. We've got a lot, we've put a lot in, and it's looking like a web page so far, but we need to actually put in our CSS document. So let's go ahead and create one. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, and I'm just going to save this as, let's do a save as here, and I'm going to call it styles.css. You can name it whatever you would like. Just remember what you name it. I'm going to navigate to my CSS folder and I'm going to save it in there. Great. So now that I can see in here, there's my styles.css. So let's link it within the site. Super important. Doesn't work if it's not linked into your site. So make sure you do that before you really start working. So I'm going to scroll up to your header, or your head tag, not header, head tag within your HTML, and let's go ahead and bring in that link. So I'm going to create a link. It's going to go to a style sheet, so relative to a style sheet. Going to go to, it's not going to be master. That just popped that in for me. I'm going to call it styles.css, and it should go to my CSS folder. Oops, so I spell styles correctly. Always a winner. Styles.css. Let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to navigate back over to my styles. And let's go ahead and put in some of our styling for the testimonial section. So I like to comment out the sections that I do. So I'm going to comment, it's a little /star, let's comment testimonials section. Section star slash. Okay. And so the first thing I want to do is take out some of the padding around here, because there is obviously padding. I want the images that we're going to be putting in to go full width. Actually, let's backtrack just a hot second. Let's go ahead and put in the pictures before, and that way we can double check that everything's looking correct for our code. So I'm going to bring in the pictures. So I'm going to call out the testimonial section. Testimonials, and then I'm going to call out the ID of Jane H. And then I'm going to give that a background picture. So there's going to be a picture behind everything. So I'm going to type in background URL, parentheses, images slash, this one's going to be testimonial, Jane H. .jpg, and I'm going to set it to no repeat because I don't want it to repeat. Otherwise, by default, it repeats X and Y. So no repeat. And then center horizontally, center vertically, center, center. And then I'm going to set the background size to cover. Let's go ahead and save that and refresh our page here. So I found the issue with my link to my image. I was missing the slash, so it's // images / testimonials. No repeat, center, center. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that convention for the other 3 images here, where I call for the ID of testimonials. And then I will also call for the ID of the next person, which is McPherson's. Brackets. And then I'll set the background URL, parentheses, / images / testimonial McPherson's .jpg, no repeat, center and center, and then I'll set the background size to cover. Go ahead and copy that since it will apply to all of them. Save, test. There we go, that looks good. Next one, testimonials for that ID, and then calling out the ID for John B, and then setting that background image to images folder. And repeat. Center, cover, testimonials, and then calling out Lorraine S. Background URL. Images, testimonial, gonna have a problem there. Make sure I'm getting it correct here, and then Lorraine S. .jpg, no repeat. Center and center. Set the background size to cover. Save that. There we go. And then I've got the pictures behind all of these. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of styling with the quote itself. So I'm going to go ahead and take some padding off of, in general, padding on all the sides. So I'm going to call out that testimonials section, just the testimonials section itself, and set the padding to 0. I'm going to turn off this word testimonials. So I'm going to call out testimonials. The H2 tag. Oops, in the wrong spot. Hang on. In the wrong spot. There we go. Okay. Oops, make sure I'm in the right spot. And I'll set the display to none. Save that. That will turn that off. All right, let's style the block quote itself. So I'm going to call out testimonials. And then the block quote. I'm going to set the margin to 0. Border left is none. Set the min height to being 500 pixels. And a position to relative. Let's style that quote itself. So I'm going to call out the testimonials. Block quote. Quote. Oops. Almost forgot to call that class. And then I'm going to set the background color. And this is going to be a little bit of transparency, so I'm going to use the RGBA, which allows me to do some transparency. And that color is going to be 255, 255, 255 at 0.6, 60% opacity. I set the padding to 20 pixels. And then 5%. I set the position to being absolute. Whoops. Forget your semicolon there. Position is absolute. Set the bottom to 0. Width is going to be 75%. Going to be a little smaller. I'm going to set a font weight. We need to bring in our font here shortly. Font weight to 400. Hang on, I almost forgot a semicolon there. That would mess everything up. And then I'm going to set a border radius of 0. 50 pixels. That'll give it a rounded, at one rounded corner, and then 0 and 0. All right, let's save that. Let's take a look at some of the damage we've done here. There we go. So there's the little quote is now in a cute little box, except they go really, really tall when it's at this size. So we're going to hide some of that quote there. It looks a little better when I actually have it pulled out here. That looks nice. So far so good with our styling. Let's go ahead and keep going. go ahead and change the color for when we hover over it. So I'm going to call out the Testimonials section. Block quote. And then I'm going to call out the quote and then a hover action. And that will be changing the background color to a different transparency, do RGBA, parentheses, 239, 240, 196, and then at 90% opacity. So 0.9, semicolon. All right, and now I'm going to, let's go ahead and turn off that for the customer and for the more section. So we're going to target that testimonials section. I'm going to target the quote and more. Oops, not that, comma. And then we're also going to target the testimonials section and the customer ID. And we're going to set the opacity to 0. We're going to set the font size to 0. Line height to 0. And we'll set padding top of 10 pixels. Go ahead and save that, refresh, let's see what we got here. So there we go. We've turned off anything that has that ID or that class of quote, and then more, as well as the customer. So if it has the more or the customer, it's now turned off. And then we have a cool little hover color, so you can see when I hover over this. So that will hide this. So then when we hover over this, the quote should pop up. So we need to go ahead and add for that as well. But before I do that, because we're going to start styling some fonts, I'm going to go ahead and change the typography. This is a good place to stop with this. And I'm going to go ahead and add some typography. So I'm going to break the video here. We're not totally done with the testimonial sections, but I'm just going to start a new chapter, which is a lot more CSS, and then bringing in our Google font because we're going to change the type for this whole site. So stay tuned for that. On the next video, we will finish up this and then we will add more CSS. See you on the next one.